Welcome back to the podcast. Today, my guest is Christian Wise Smith. Now, I want to bring Christian on here for several reasons. First of all, his story is amazingly authentic and real. Raised by a family in Cincinnati, he was immersed in the justice system, drug charges, gang activity. He basically thought that was just how you made a living growing up. It's a story about how, against improbable odds, he made it out, not only getting a college degree, but a master's and a law degree as well. The more obvious reason I brought Christian on is that he's running for Fulton County DA here in Georgia. If you're not familiar with the geographical area here in Atlanta, that includes the bulk of Atlanta: Alpharetta, Roswell, Milton, Sandy Springs, Brookhaven, East Point, College Park, Union City. He gets pretty deep and honest about why he's running. It's very personal, and why it's time for a change. The days of measuring success by conviction rates are over. He says we need to direct outreach to the younger community well before they get through the system. His cause is one I believe wholeheartedly in, and that is restorative justice. More importantly, Christian and I, we have a very open discussion on race relations. We talk about the protests going on, some of the riots here in the South, and the progress we may or may not have made to this point. But either way, I hope you enjoy it. Please share it. Rate us as well. Ladies and gents, is this the next Fulton County District Attorney, my friend, my colleague, Christian Wise Smith? Christian Wise Smith, welcome to the podcast. I am so happy to talk to you because I've been wanting to do this for a while, but I have a lot of feelings on prosecution and how we prosecute people in general, but let alone minorities, people of color, things like that. So I think this is a very, very relevant conversation, especially for what the world is going through right now. I don't know if you know this or not. So I was a prosecutor in the state of Florida about 2.5 years. Generally, for the most part, I didn't like my job. I didn't. I did not like. I don't think I liked my boss much, and I tried a lot of cases. It was great, but I got a lot of wonderful experience. But I think what I didn't like was just the retributional aspect of being a prosecutor, the kill, win at all costs, sort of that mindset. And that might not have been preached, but that was definitely the mindset that our bosses had, everything like that. And I guess in a lot of places, and I feel like that culture is slowly changing, more towards a culture of restorative justice and things that I'm excited to see change. And I don't know much about your platform other than I know how you prosecute people because I've gone against you before in court. When you were a prosecutor, myself as a criminal defense attorney, and I've been extraordinarily satisfied with how you handle cases, how you work them up, and how approachable you are to listen and talk to me as well. So I certainly appreciate that. So you are running for Fulton District Attorney, and before you get into why you're running and everything, I'd like to know about your story, okay? There was something I remember was extraordinary about it, but I'm not gonna sort of hinder that. I wanna hear kind of where you came from, what brought you to this point right now, where you are. So go ahead.
Well, first, Paisley, thanks for having me on your show. You know, it's always an honor to work with you. And we did meet in a courtroom, like you said, and I did not know that you were a prosecutor. So it's interesting to hear your take on it, that kill, win at all cost mentality. That is still the culture in prosecutors' offices today. That's partly why I'm running, to get rid of that conviction by any means necessary approach and make it about people over conviction rates. And, I just want to say, too, before I jump into my background, you and I have always, we've gone at each other, we've had some battles, but it was always a high level of respect there. So thank you for having me on your show. This race is personal to me, man. My heart and soul is in this. This campaign is really me telling my life story. I'm not running off of issues to make me famous. I'm not running because I think I have name recognition. I'm not running for political gain. I'm running because I feel like nobody else in the country has my backstory and the education and the foundation that I have to do this. So I grew up in the system. I grew up seeing my mom in and out of jail.
Where'd you grow up?
Cincinnati, Ohio. So I grew up in Cincinnati. My family is originally from Eatonton, Georgia, dating back to slave days. And my grandmother moved to Detroit, then Cincinnati. So growing up as a kid, we came down to Georgia a few times. It was one of the only places we could afford to go because we had a free place to stay down here with family. But seeing my mom in it, excuse me, seeing her get arrested several times, I mean, that definitely shaped who I am today. But during my childhood, of course, that was painful, trying to figure out my way. My grandmother was a gangster. There's no other way to say it. She sold drugs. She boosted. She was in and out of jail herself. She's a convicted felon. I was with her one time and saw her get arrested when I was 7 years old.
What was your mom arrested for? What kind of crimes? Like minor stuff or what?
Yeah, mostly drug crimes, minor drug crimes, some disorderly conduct type of crimes. And my mom also has a mental disability. And so I'll get to my campaign later, but everything about my campaign is personal and how I've seen people go through the system dealing with their issues and how, as you said, the system isn't really geared towards helping people break out of their issues. It's about winning and convictions. And so, seeing my mom in and out of jail, seeing my grandmother in jail, I have an uncle who's serving a life sentence for murder. And I can remember being a kid, going to visit him in prison. And I didn't get it as a kid. When I got older, I realized, I think my mom was trying to teach my brother and I that this is not where we wanted to end up. And I can remember vividly the smell of popcorn. I don't like popcorn to this day because every time we went to Lebanon Correctional Facility to see my uncle, he always ate a bag of microwave popcorn. And so the smell of popcorn reminds me of prison. One of my close friends growing up, used to spend the night at my house. We played basketball together, football. Buck Williams was killed at 17 in the street. He was selling drugs. And I thought that's what I was supposed to do. I had another friend shot selling drugs. Growing up, the people who were successful or who looked to be successful were drug dealers. And so I thought that that's what I was destined to be. I got kicked out of school in the 11th grade. I used to skip school, fight. I used to sell stolen clothes out of the trunk of my car. And I didn't think that graduating high school was in the cards for me. But, I would say by the grace of God, fortunately, I finished high school. Then I became the first in my family to graduate from college. Went on and got a master's degree after that, then a law degree.
Let's back up a little bit. There was something in your story I thought I remembered about being kicked out of high school at one point.
Mm-hmm.
Did you get in trouble with the law? What happened?
No, I skipped school a lot. Some fights, stuff like that. And so, I had missed so much school. I think I failed like 4 or 5 classes that school year. And so the school that I was in said, hey, man, you can't come back. So, I'm in summer school that following my junior year, going into my senior year. Then, I had to figure out another school to go to. And I ended up graduating from a school called Hughes in Cincinnati, all black. School in the middle of the city. I think that maybe like 10 people that I graduated went to college. I'm the only person who went on to, become an attorney from the folks that I graduated with. And this is not looking down on them at all. I don't think I'm better than anybody. It's just explaining to you the environment that I come from. That people, from my neighborhood, people who grew up where I did, we weren't exposed to much. And a lot of times, people committed crimes just to survive. And so, I'm super grateful and fortunate and blessed that I was able to break out of that. But I didn't just break out of it and say, hey, I made it. I make it a point to try to inspire other people who come from places like I do to let them know that they can make it as well. I've spoken at pretty much every high school in APS. I've been up to Athens. I've been to DeKalb County. I've been to Henry and Clayton counties. I made it a personal mission of mine to try to save every young person that I can, to let them know, like, hey, look, I've sat in the chair you sat in. I've been there. I know the hurts. I know the pains. I know it, the failure. But if I was able to overcome it, I know it sounds cliche. People say it all the time. If I did it, you can do it. But when those kids really understand that I was where they are and they see where I am now, I hope that it does inspire some of them.
What was the context of you, these speaking engagements? Is that in the context of this campaign, or is that just something you do anyway?
Nah, it's something. So I graduated law school in 2011. I started doing this in 2011.
Yeah. Where did you go to law school?
Western Michigan, Cooley Law School.
Yep.
And so I was interning at Grady in their law department my last semester of law school. I was offered a job by Natalie Archibong in Atlanta City Council. I started off as a legislative aide, and eventually she made me her chief of staff.
And that's how you made it down to Atlanta? From law school?
Well, no. So I lived in Atlanta before I went to law school.
Okay.
So, yeah, I was already here. I moved to Atlanta in 2005. Quick, funny story about that.
Yeah.
Well, not funny, but I pull up at Grady March 11th, 2005, seeking an internship at Grady. I get pulled over. I get pulled out of the car. Cops, full riot gear, AKs pointed at me. Get out. Where you going? Let me see your ID. And I'm like, yo, what did I do?
What were you wearing?
A shirt and tie. I was going to Grady to get for an interview for an internship. I saw police cars, news vans everywhere. And I remember thinking to myself, I'm like, is President Bush here? Like, why is all of this stuff at the hospital? And I found out later the Brian Nichols situation had just happened. And they thought I was Brian Nichols.
I don't really see the
March 11,
resemblance, but
2005.
okay.
I guess tall black guy.
Sure.
I guess he had on a shirt and tie in court that day. I don't know.
Yeah.
But
for anyone listening, Brian Nichols, look up courthouse shooting, Atlanta. Brian Nichols. It was pretty much a tragic event by all accounts. But okay, so you moved to Atlanta in 2005.
Yes.
Okay. For what? You said to look for an internship or?
Right. So I took that internship at Grady. Then I got hired at Grady when I finished undergrad. So I was working at Grady, and I was also in grad school full time.
Awesome. And that is a remarkable story. And I think, God, when anybody hears those stories of coming from absolutely nothing, I don't care if you're a refugee or you come from the streets or the projects. I mean, I don't know what that's like, Yeah. I jokingly tell people like I was the poorest kid in East Cobb, and but my mom's single mom, 5 kids, but she had a good job. She didn't do drugs. She didn't do any of that stuff. I wasn't around drugs. I was definitely I was pretty clean up until I was like 16 or 17 and I discovered beer, but yeah, but it's but I mean, I still grew up on, I always thought I was poor because I grew up on hand-me-downs and broken toys. But no, I think when I see people like yourself that have come from that, I'm like, okay, that's broke. That's a whole nother level that I don't understand and I never will understand. But you are now running for Fulton County District Attorney. Your opponent is Paul Howard. He's been the incumbent for probably 20-something years. And I'll be very upfront. I don't know Paul. Okay, I know his nephew is Dwight Howard.
Yes.
I know people that have worked for Paul, and I know those people that have worked for Paul don't like him very much. And this is allegedly, and again, I don't know personally. Okay, but I've heard things like just kind of governs like a tyrant. There is sort of that conviction mindset, and I don't even know if that was just sort of like a time period thing that came from, that you have to be tough on crime, because back in the, Clinton ran on that platform. Mm-hmm. It was like a competition when you're running for office, how hard you could be on crime and how long you could lock people up for,
Yep.
And that's like, oh wait, okay, that just screwed several generation of which of course had a disparate impact on people of color. So. You're running against Paul. I don't know him that well, but like I said, by all accounts, and I know a lot of criminal defense attorneys, and I never did serious criminal cases in Fulton County, so I've never had to work against his people. But why are you running against him? Why does he need to go? Why do you need to replace him?
So overcoming everything that I've said to this point, then becoming a prosecutor in 2013, starting off in Atlanta Municipal Court where I met you, where I prosecuted, stuff as small as seatbelt tickets on up to DUI. it was in that system initially where I found out that we don't care about people. We care about the numbers. We care about the percentages. We care about the fine money. And, my first year there in 2013, I had this 17-year-old kid who was arrested for marijuana. He's a senior in high school, and it's like I'm looking in the mirror, looking at this kid. I can tell that he's from a place like where I'm from, that he's experiencing some of the things that I've experienced. And he has his mom in court with him, and I pulled him to the side. He's got his pants sagged a little bit, got a few tattoos. He's like, hey, man, I just want to plead no law and get this over with. So I'm like, man, where do you want to be 10 years from now? He's like, man, I'm playing in the NFL. I said, well, what do you have to do first? You got to play in college. It's like, you ain't going to college if you get convicted of this marijuana. You can't get financial aid with a drug charge. So now I have his attention. And so we have a heart-to-heart, man-to-man conversation. And I tell him, I'm going to give him the opportunity to prove, not to me, not to his mom, but to himself, that he wants to turn his life around. So I made up some conditions for him. We went in front of Judge Gaines. She kind of gave him, her speech, her kind of tough love speech, and said, hey, we're giving you an opportunity. Kid does everything. I dismiss his case. 2014, his mom emails me. She says, hey, I don't know if you remember me. Thanks for giving my son a chance. Last year, I wanted to let you know it's not in vain. He's playing football at a JUCO in Oklahoma, doing great in the classroom. 2015, she calls me. Says, hey, my son transferred to the University of Tennessee. He has a chance to start this year. Thank you. We wouldn't be here without you. 2016, she calls and says, hey, man, you got to come to a game. You got to come experience Neyland Stadium and this sea of orange, because we wouldn't be here if it weren't for you. So I bought tickets. My kids and I went to a game. Then his senior year, we went to 3 of his games. Then in 2018, I went to his graduation up in Knoxville and saw him get a bachelor's degree in communications. I tell that story because the back end of it, when I created that diversion for him, I got in trouble. My immediate supervisor went off. We're not social services. Fine money in the city is down. That was an easy conviction all day, every day. And I said, are you kidding me? Not only did I potentially save this kid's life, who now has the opportunity to be the first in his family to go to college, but think about his cousins, his siblings, people in his neighborhood who he can inspire and influence now. And so it was right then and there, my first year as a prosecutor in 2013, that I said, I hate this system. But I've been a part of it for 7 years, and as the years went on, and I can tell you more stories like that where I saw the value in trying to restore people and trying to get people the tools and the resources they needed to live better lives. I mean, I can tell you about Raven Young. She was 22, pregnant, high school dropout. Created a diversion for her. She went and got her GED, called me every week to let me know how things were going. She went to college. I got in trouble for that. So I said, you know what? I'm tired. And then, so I leave there. I worked for Paul for a little while. And things got worse on that level. Where
you work for Paul Howard?
Yes.
Okay.
I went there in 2018.
I didn't know that.
I'll keep my personal thoughts about him to myself. I mean, I haven't run that kind of campaign. I haven't slung any mud. I've kept it all about, policies and leadership styles. His leadership style is conviction by any means necessary. His leadership style is fear. You walk around with this fear of being reprimanded, this fear of being fired, this fear of being embarrassed publicly if you don't achieve convictions like he wants you to. And so being fed up with that, I said, you know what? I'm 30, at the time I was 36. And I have the life experience. I believe I have enough professional experience. And I also have a business background that he doesn't have. Having a master's degree in management, working at Grady, where I've led a $70 million project, being the chief of staff in city council, where I've written law that's on the books right now. If you're ever in East Atlanta Village, you are in a part of town under zoning law that I wrote. So understanding how to write laws and how laws work and how business works and working with big budgets and big staffs, and my background, understanding the root causes of crime and how people are really impacted by the justice system. I said, you know what? Instead of quitting, instead of complaining, instead of going on to make, I got a lot of friends in personal injury who make a lot of money, and I'm very proud of them. One of my best friends, we got sworn in together December 7th, 2012. He just bought a Bentley truck. Proud of him. That's my boy. That's my brother. I love him. I could be doing that, but my heart and soul is in this. There's nobody else who has the backstory that I have. There's nobody else who understands the deeper issues of the justice system like I understand it. So I decided to run. I decided to be the change that I wanted to see. I'm the first progressive candidate to run for DA ever in the state of Georgia. Well, I'm not going to say in the South. I believe there was a progressive who ran down in Houston last year, Audia Jones. But other than the two of us, there are no progressive prosecutors anywhere in the South.
How does a progressive prosecutor differ from someone like, well, Paul Howard? He's still a Democrat, but he's not progressive. What is progressive prosecution? You
touched on it. So the generation that Paul comes from is that Clinton era, that tough on crime, that 3 strikes you're out, that generation. So now being progressive means let's figure out how to use our resources to help restore people. Let's forget about the money. Let's forget about the conviction rates. What is fair and what's just and what will help people if they unfortunately happen to encounter us in the justice system? How can we use this opportunity to help make them better people so that we don't see them come back? And so I want to point out or shout out Seattle, Washington. As far as I know, they are the only city who's figured out a way to do this. In 2011, they created a program called LEAD, Law Enforcement Assistant Diversion. If you are arrested, and historically, Seattle has had problems with police brutality. Seattle was a predominantly white city. There was always a lot of complaints and racial disparities with how they treated their black citizens. So they create this program where if you are arrested for drug possession or prostitution, they give you the opportunity to be aligned with whatever services you need to break out of that lifestyle. So I went out there for 2 days in 2018 to study this program, and it blew my mind.
Why did you go out there?
So there's an organization in Atlanta called PAD, P-A-D, Pre-Arrest Diversion, and I was working with PAD. PAD is running a pilot program in the city of Atlanta. They were doing some work with the solicitor's office and Paul's office and the DA's office and the City of Atlanta PD's office and the Fulton County PD's office. So I was a volunteer from my office working with PAD, trying to figure out ways that we can incorporate this here in the City of Atlanta. PAD is I would say a spinoff of LEAD. So we all, the folks working with PAD, we went out there together to, go to the source, to be educated and study what they were doing. And so seeing that they're prosecutors, their police officers, their mayor, the city council folks, the community, all of these people we were in a huge conference room, all of these people in this room who love this program because this program, it changed the justice system as we know it. From 2011 to 2018 when we were there, they've had over 500 success stories where people who they took from being on the streets, committing these, I would call quality of life crimes, survival crimes. Now these people have jobs and they have homes and apartments. They're off of the street. So Seattle figured out a way to get crime rates to go down by increasing employment rates, property values, school system ratings. And I'm like, man, if this works in Seattle, it's got to work in Atlanta. And if we bring it to Atlanta and get it to work here, Atlanta influences everything. Atlanta influences the South. So if we do it here, it'll spread. The plan is to create a big movement across the South where you mentioned it earlier, restorative justice. That's what being a progressive is you take that unfortunate encounter that somebody has and you say, okay, now how can we figure out how to never see you again? How to get you providing for yourself and your family, because if somebody is doing that, they're not busy committing crimes against you and me. So ultimately, we make us safer by helping provide resources and opportunities and tools for people to live better lives.
Imagine that, restorative justice, investing in your community. Yeah. The types of prosecutors, and you mentioned Seattle. I would bet that also made a huge difference in the culture of the office. Can you tell me what you saw there?
Yes, so interacting with a couple of their assistant district attorneys, and there was another conference in Atlanta this past July where I met some more prosecutors from Seattle, and I said, hey, I came out there and studied LEAD, and their eyes just lit up. the way they operate is, I would say, from a place of joy, because they don't have this thing hanging over their head where it's conviction, win, win, win. They don't have that stress. They know that their job.
It's a miserable state from experiencing. It's absolutely miserable.
It sucks. It's terrible. And they have the culture there is they get to come to work every day knowing that they have the chance to make somebody's life better instead of just inflating numbers for their boss. And so, I mean, they love going to work out there. And I want to also bring that here, because the culture in the Fulton DA's office, it's miserable, man. Like, I'm 37 years old.
Yeah, what is it like?
I've been working since I was 12 years old. I've never had a job that stressed me out as much, that I hated as much. It was hard getting up, going to work there every day. I'll tell you a real life case I had there. I have a woman charged with theft. She was a Latino woman. She worked for a maid service, and she stole some expensive, some purses or shoes or something from the lady that she worked for. And so, but the value of the item was made it a felony. And so the lady had never been arrested before, no criminal history. In my eyes, she's a prime candidate for diversion, and restitution. Pay the lady back, what she stole. But let's get her in a program. We don't need to put a felony conviction on her record. This is her first arrest.
Sounds like a perfect case for diversion, right?
Thank you.
Yeah.
My supervisor says the plea recommendation is 1 year. And I said, why?
To serve?
Yes. I said, why? So the culture in that office, the way Paul drives his conviction rates, and if anybody listening, if you've watched any of the debates or forums that we've had during this campaign season, in every single one of them, he brags about having a 92% conviction rate. So what he does is he'll start off with a high plea recommendation, which we know is, you knew that was ridiculous as soon as you heard it. And so when a defendant hears that, they're like, man, a year? You want me to do a year? Okay, what do I have to do? And so now you back people into a corner, and so now you get to look like you're being nice by saying, well, I'll reduce it to a misdemeanor, and you do 12 months probation, or I'll do X, Y. So you start off high, and then you're willing to come down a little bit low because you're backing somebody into a corner to take a plea.
So in that scenario, they wouldn't plea out to a felony charge or anything, but they'd plead to something, maybe not a morally culpable offense. Maybe they'd plead to something like disorderly conduct, a misdemeanor offense, and that is his conviction.
Exactly.
Right.
So and that's what the public doesn't understand is they're entering pleas, but not to felonies. Some of them being reduced to misdemeanors, but for him, that still counts as a conviction. But let me finish this story, though. So in that case, my supervisor says a year. I say, why? We go back and forth. I put the woman in diversion. Well, let me clarify this point first. I talk to the victim. The victim says, hey, look, I know she's never been in trouble before. I know that she has 3 kids. I'm hurt that she stole from me. If she needed something, she could have asked. I would have paid her a little bit more money if she was going through something. Let her pay me back, not even for everything she stole. She just said, let her pay me back for one of the items that she stole. The victim had a big heart. Let her pay me back for one of the items she stole. Let her do this program so that she won't have a felony conviction on her record. She just can't work for me anymore. I tell my supervisor that. My supervisor still says, no, if they want to go to trial, if they don't want to take the plea, we can take it to trial. I'm like, why? That's a waste of taxpayer dollars. That's a waste of our time. The victim is already saying she doesn't want a conviction. She wants this lady to be restored. So the victim is probably not going to show up to testify at a trial. Why? I put the woman in diversion anyway. I got in trouble. And I told my supervisor, I said, look.
In trouble a lot.
Yeah. I said, look, if you're going to, write me up, suspend me, fire me, whatever, I'm going to still sleep good at night, knowing that I did the right thing, knowing that I used my discretion with my bar license to do the fair thing and what the victim wanted. There's absolutely no reason at all for us to force a plea or force a trial when we don't have to.
Yeah, I know several prosecutors that have been fired for not necessarily not in Fulton County, but when I was back in Florida, and I think if I kept going as a prosecutor in Florida, I probably would have been fired for the same thing. But you're right. There was one day I remember I looked around. I looked at everybody that had been there for longer than, let's say, 7 or 10 years. That for any long period of time, and I just looked at them, looked at how they sort of their body language and how they overall were, and they were just pissed off, angry, bitter people. And they thought, we would talk about cases, and I'm like, they got a great defense, and by the way, they don't have it necessarily. It's not just factual; they got affirmative issues here that we got to worry about, and they're just like, whatever. She's guilty. Like they need to be locked away. I'm like, all right. So, but it wasn't a good fit. Some good prosecutors that I like, and I generally speaking, I don't like prosecutors. I don't. I'll just be very upfront. But it's just because of that mindset. There's a gentleman that worked. He worked for the solicitor's office in Fulton, and he's a black gentleman. And he told me he went to a prosecutors conference, and he said the restorative justice crowd is still split from the older retributional crowd, and just by happenstance, of course, there tends to be a color disparity there as well.
Yeah.
So is that something you see generally?
Yeah, absolutely. Two important issues: age and race. Yep. And so a lot of folks who come from Paul's generation, Paul's 68 years old. So the mentality of folks in that age category, you're right. It's more of that tough on crime, that tougher approach. I pulled myself up by my bootstraps. You should be able to do the same thing. Then the race thing is a lot more complex. I think when you have people who are white who did not grow up around anybody from an inner city who kind of understands, I would just say, the plight of folks who grew up in the inner city, I think having some of that context would help prosecutors, especially non-black ones, to understand root causes a little bit more. So one of the things that I'm going to do when I get elected is the part of the mandatory training that we have will be actually going out into the community, because I think it will open your eyes sometimes. And I remember myself, like, growing up where I did, and then going to college, with a bunch of white folks, people. I'm one of my best friends from college. Her dad is vice president of a major corporation across America. And I just remember, being exposed to that type of thing was mind blowing. And I think the same will be true on the flip side. If you have, white folks who come from better areas and more affluent areas, and then they see the poverty and the I would say destruction that a lot of people who come through our system live in, that will open their eyes as well to try to understand a little bit more why certain things happen. And so I want to point this out. I know I might be kind of going off topic with this.
No, man, it's your show.
I like history. I like understanding, I would say, the spirit of why certain laws are written. And the law that I actually wrote when I worked in Atlanta City Council was a zoning law. And so one of the reasons that black communities look the way they look now is because of zoning. So think about it. Project housing, black communities that have check cashing places and liquor stores, and all of the things that are bunch of fast food, stereotypical of low income black or Latino communities, is because they were zoned that way. And that was something that black and brown people had nothing to do with. Black people didn't really get the right to vote in this country until the 1960s. A lot of these zoning laws went into place before that. And if we go back even further, I've been talking a lot of my campaign, or throughout my campaign, about the year 1865 in terms of the foundation of our justice system. Because Emancipation Proclamation happens in 1863, which essentially frees slaves. But it's important to know, before that, during the Civil War, you had slaves on both sides fighting, and for the Confederate and Union armies, and they were armed because they were thrown into this war. They were entrusted to use weapons, go kill the other side. Lincoln is assassinated, new president, a lot of frustration and people pissed off about the production dying down now because you don't have slave labor anymore. So in 1865, laws were passed called Black Codes. And Black Codes, one, they disarmed all black people who were legally armed during the Civil War. But what they also did essentially was criminalize being black. Black folks could be arrested for what they call vagrancy laws, poor living conditions, which that applied to every black person just coming out of slavery. And so because there was no prison system back then, the punishment was being put back on plantations to do involuntary labor. And so think about this. I'm going to take a big quantum leap. I know I'm talking about several years really shortly. But in 1948, city of Atlanta doesn't get its first black police officer until 1948. So if you go back to 1865, when the first set of laws to criminalize being black were put in place, we're talking about over 100 years of where every law enforcement officer is white, where every law enforcement officer is trained and taught, and it's ingrained in their mentality and DNA that I can lock up black people just for being black, for how they live. I can get away with abusing and misusing my authority against black people. That is important for people to understand, partly where we are today with everything going on in the country. What we've seen with George Floyd and Breonna Taylor, and we can name off 20 other names throughout the last several years. But there's always been this culture within law enforcement that being black is less than. And people always say, well, why, or what can we do about it? People, it blows my mind that you have people in leadership offices who don't know history. History is one of those things that most people think it's a boring subject. Most people don't care about it. But the way we break out of things, the way any revolution has happened throughout time, is because somebody was fed up or pissed off with the way things were going and they wanted to change it. But you got to know how you got where you are to be able to break out of it. So I think, understanding the historical context of upon which our justice system was built going back to 1865 helps us to understand why law enforcement looks at black people certain ways. Understanding zoning laws helps us understand why black and brown communities became to be in the first place. And so now that we know this, now we can figure out ways to break out of it.
So why were things zoned that way? Was that to keep them secluded in one area?
Absolutely.
To keep all those places?
It was about control and voter suppression, right? So control meaning that, okay, now these people are allowed to vote. Now these people can go to school. Now they can get jobs. But we don't want them disrupting our economy. And we want to be able to control votes. So think about, gerrymandering, think about district lines. If you have... I'll use a city like Marietta, where you're from. So if you have Marietta, that's a primarily white city, but you have this small block zone to build, let's say, project housing where 10,000 people can live, right? The way you work those voting districts, right, is it just depends on where you put them. And so now if you know that you need a strong Republican or racist, whatever person in office that you want, if you zone these people over in a certain area, you take away their vote. So that's why understanding zoning laws and where things are so important, because it was a way to control votes and a way to control the economy.
This is awesome, man. I love the historical lesson here. I was also excited about this podcast because there are things I could vent about that I held a lot of things back. I think when I was I used to do small crimes a lot. I used to have a pretty sizable traffic ticket business. But one of the things I saw in one of the jurisdictions that is south of Atlanta, or in South Atlanta, I'll just East Point, But one thing I saw there was and I won't say any names or any specific positions, but I felt in general, you've got a community that's predominantly black. But I saw what the court system as a whole there seemed to just absolutely undercut and rip down their own people so much, and that is my general opinion. Whether it was fine amounts, whether it was the way they were punished, it was something that it just blew my mind. I would look across the courtroom, I'd see all these poor black folks, and they would just be, and I'm like, how the hell are they supposed to get ahead when they're, and guess what? All the leadership in East Point was also black,
Yep.
So, but you're right. You've got prosecution that sooner or later becomes about money and budgets and things like that. And it's a vicious cycle that keeps people in it. So it blew my mind. And just seeing people And they couldn't afford a lawyer. If they could have afforded a lawyer, I could just scream to the courtroom, bind it over, get it out of here.
Yeah.
You know, you have no business in this court, you know. But they didn't, they wouldn't even talk to you in East Point until you signed a waiver waiving your right to a trial by jury.
Oh.
At that time period. Yeah, I don't know if they still do that. But yeah, and I was just like, this is ridiculous. So any case that I ever got down there, I automatically bounded over to state court, trial by jury. Even if we had no intention to try it by jury, we're just like, get it out of here. We'll get another fair shake, you know. So unbelievably unfair system. But it's prosecutors like you, my friend Keith Gamage, Sherry Boston's my friend as well, people that see the other side of prosecution and see the bigger picture, you know. Yeah. And and I would say this. Someone like you know, you haven't, so you worked for Paul for 2 years, so you generally understand the hierarchy of what maybe how to build a team and stuff like that, or maybe how not to build a team. Mm-hmm. But I would say, and again, I'm just venting here, but I would say that, you know, I mean, hell, I mean, I voted for Barack Obama, but if he became president through his experience, and I think he did a fine job. Some of my listeners might seriously disagree, but I don't care. If he did that, I think you're going to be fine, especially if you take the mindset, I think, of hiring people that are smarter than you, you know,
absolutely.
To surround, you know what I mean? Like,
absolutely.
I mean, you're a very, very smart guy, obviously, but I mean, you know, hiring people that understand that organization and how to build that successful team. You know, I understand that's one of the great qualities of leaders, of good leaders that I see, people that are not threatened by having people that are smarter than them. And I sense that is not the current situation there now. I sense that. You know, but anyway, so last week George Floyd died because some cop put his knee on his neck for 9 minutes, and I can't even look at the pictures anymore, let alone a video of it. You know, I was going to go back and watch and see how I wanted to know how long it was. What I did the other day, I had a couple beers first, of course, but I was with my wife. We were watching some of the news, and I told my wife, I was like, you know what? How about let me lay down on the hardwood floor right here, and I need you to put your knee on my neck. I want to see what it feels like. And I said, don't put all your weight on me. I just want to let's go gradual. And she got to about 50% of her body weight, and I thought my neck was going to snap. You know, she's 115 pounds. Yeah. Sorry, baby. I just told your weight. I'm sorry. Anyway, she's 115 pounds, and so that wasn't much weight on my neck. And granted, my neck's not that thick anyway. So I couldn't imagine, I can certainly imagine how somebody would have died from that, especially that officer was quite a bit bigger than my lovely wife. But being black in America, we've got all these riots this week. We've got social unrest, and I think this is sort of a culmination also of COVID-19 isolation. And it's just like everything's just coming to a boiling point with tension in this country. What is your mindset, I guess, or your system of prosecution? Well, let me start out with this. How would you prosecute people that are arrested for protesting for alleged felonies?
So the thing about protesting, I think there are two groups of people out there. I think that there are those who genuinely want to just make their voices be heard, where they're out there with their hearts are in the right place. Then there are those people taking advantage of this vulnerability, and they are out there to incite violence and looting. So if someone fell into that category, I would wholeheartedly move forward with, going with whatever charges were appropriate. The folks who were arrested who were, I know there's been some body cam or cell phone videos or, doing absolutely nothing, maybe just chanting, maybe just trying to make their voice and their presence known. Those people shouldn't be arrested at all, in my opinion. And I hate that people are using this opportunity for self-gain when this is a real issue. This is a real
What do you mean?
crime.
What's an example of that? Self-gain?
The people who are looting for absolutely no reason other than to loot and to cause property destruction, that is not that's not going to help us in this movement. And I think it helps to paint this picture of the stereotype that black people have anyway, that we can be short-tempered or violent or unruly. And so and I've seen on some of the videos that I've watched, that I've had the time to watch, that some people causing this property destruction of white folks, where they're out spray painting and breaking windows. I saw one video where police officers were breaking windows out. So I think
that's great. That's wonderful.
So yeah, so that it all gets jumbled in and tied into the narrative that, black people were pissed off, they're burning down the city. Like, no, we want our voices to be heard. And so here's my challenge. Here's my call of action to everybody. There's two things. One is voting, right? We've been preaching voting for forever. And it baffles my mind that so many black people don't vote. Not just black people, people in general. I mean, think about what women had to go through to get the rights to vote, let alone what my people had to go through to vote. And so a lot of times people will say, well, my voice doesn't matter, or my vote doesn't count, or there's no candidate that I like. There's no candidate who understands my issues. So that is my second call of action. Be the change you want to see. Let's start running for these positions of power. Let's start running for office. I'm no different or no more special than anybody else. I got pissed off and fed up with the system. Instead of just complaining, I decided to run. And so I'm encouraging and challenging other people to do the same thing. And I would say my third call to action is I issued a challenge publicly on social media, on both my Facebook and Instagram, where I called out every DA in this country to start uprooting the racism and the discrimination and the abuse that has been ingrained in the DNA of our justice system, and start enforcing laws to hold officers like the coward who killed George Floyd accountable. A lot of times these go unchecked because the DAs won't prosecute. And so thank God for the technology we have with camera phones, because this isn't new. I mean, this has been happening for forever, but now we have the technology where it's televised and you can watch a black man be killed on live TV, kneed in his neck for 9 minutes. And I remember I've only could stomach watching it once. I can't watch it again. But I remember watching that video like, okay, he's going to get up. He's going to get, I'm like, there's no way this dude is about to die. Even though I knew from, all of the stories and reports that he was killed. But I'm like, okay, he's getting up. He goes from talking, I can't breathe, moving, then he gets quiet. I'm like, okay, he's going to get up. I'm like, he never gets up. And he's handcuffed. He's on the ground. Like, you already have, you have the, whatever problem was there, you already have it under control. So now what was the, sorry, man.
No.
You need DAs to speak up and stand up against that type of action. When I think about Ahmaud Arbery down in Brunswick, I went down to Brunswick after he was killed to go stand and have, when I just mentioned the protesters here, I was a part of a group down in Brunswick where it was peaceful, where we just wanted our voices heard. There was no looting. There was no rioting. The way Jackie Johnson handled that case down there, slap in the face of the justice system. And here I am, a black man, running for DA, where this, can potentially be my colleague in a couple of months. And it just hit me, man. Like, before people know who I am, before you hear me talk or know anything about me, you see me first. And I can't change being black. I mean, this is the skin that God put me in, and I'm cool with that. But I want people to know that me having black skin, me having tattoos, me talking in slang a little bit, I mean, it's not a sin and it's not a crime. It doesn't make me evil. It doesn't make me a monster. I'm not to be feared. But we go back to 1865 of these, almost 200 years of laws and systems being in place where people who look like me, where it was okay to be treated as less than by people in the law enforcement system. And the reason why I'm so vocal about this history, the reason why I want everybody to know this history, because it's once you know it, then I think it helps you understand better of why we need to break away from it. Just seeing black people getting killed and brutalized by police, I mean, that should piss you off in and of itself. But when I say the term black codes, most people don't know what the hell I'm talking about. Most people haven't heard of it. Do a quick Google search. I mean, I'm so versed in it because I studied it in law school. It was something that was important to me to know that history. I mean, I didn't know why at the time. I didn't, back this is 2009. I didn't know that I was going to run for office one day and have to essentially educate, maybe the entire country, whoever hears me throughout my platform. But it's such important history to know where we come from, why black people are seen the way they are seen, as they're seen in the justice system. And then I want to shout you out, man. Thank you for doing this. This is what it is going to take, in my opinion, for us to heal and to bridge the gap. The ultimate goal has to be healing. There's been enough division. There's been enough divide. There's been enough black, white. You got a wife, I got a wife. You got a family, I got a, we both got to pay our mortgages. When our stomach starts growling, we're both hungry. If we're both sick, we're going to lay in the bed. If we get cut, we're going to die. The money in your pocket is green just like the money in my pocket. You got to put gas in your car. Only thing different about us in this room right now is that my skin is darker than yours. That's it. But it takes having conversations like this, in my opinion, where we're not yelling and screaming at each other, because when that happens, nobody's being heard. Where it's a heart-to-heart conversation, where there's some understanding, where I can tell you some of the history, some of the oppression that, like you said, you didn't know some of that history.
Yeah.
But now that you know it, it's like, okay, I think maybe there's a little bit more empathy, maybe there's a little bit more call to action to want to make things right. But the divide has to go. And one of the reasons, or one of the ways we do that, in my opinion, or two of the ways, is voting, and then two, becoming the candidate. Vote for candidates who are willing to make this known. I think that a part of the old guard too, there was this mentality of, having certain relationships and protecting those relationships and being able to get away with certain things. And think about everything that our DA now has been accused of, the money issues, the women issues. All of that stuff comes from a culture of being able to hide. All of that stuff comes from a culture of silence. And so I'm calling that out. Part of my platform has been to create an independent transparency board where I want you to know where every penny I'm spending is going. I want you to know the decisions that we're making on cases. And I never will slip, but let's say I do, so you can hold me accountable. You can call me out. I don't want to hide. And I also want to be, I'm committed to doing monthly town hall meetings, not where I'm telling you guys to come to me in the DA's office. I'm coming to you. I'm coming to your community, to your neighborhood, to your city, because it takes people coming together, sitting down at the table, to have real, meaningful, powerful dialogue for us to get over our differences and start to come together as human beings. And we have the power. The justice system has the power to do that. The justice system is one of the few systems in our life that touches everybody. Everybody listening, everybody in America has been one of these three things. You've either been a witness to a crime, the victim of a crime, or the defendant in a crime. That's you and me. I guarantee it is. And I'm willing to bet that that's everybody listening. So the justice system has a lot of reach. But we've seen historically people have abused that power for self-gain. And I think that myself and other true progressive DAs are wanting to use this power to make us better human beings and make our society better.
Real quick, what else do you want to do when you take office as district attorney?
We're going to end cash bail day one. So that is another system very deeply rooted in racism, where we've seen black and brown and poor people disproportionately.
Because they don't have money, so they have to stay in jail. Yep.
Exactly. You can be rich and kill somebody and get $1 million bond, pay it, and be out the same day.
So what's the alternative?
It's a system where money is taken off the table. So I'm not saying that everybody's going to get a bond. Some people will be detained pre-trial, but money won't be the determining factor. We will use the Ayala factors. Is this person a flight risk? Is this person likely to commit additional felonies? Is this person likely to intimidate witnesses? That is what should be used to determine bond, not money, in my opinion. So if somebody steals a pack of crackers, we'll give them a signature bond. We can make them report to pretrial once, up to 5 days a week. We can put an ankle monitor on them. There are other things that we can do to make sure that people keep their jobs, they keep their housing, so that they aren't at risk of losing everything. Then they find themselves committing more crimes to survive. The cash bond system plays into recidivism and repeat offenders. So we're going to break that system. We're going to stop prosecuting marijuana. The war on drugs, we all know, was one of the many things that destroyed the black community. That So, quick history lesson again. 86, Congress passes a law, 5 grams of crack cocaine was a mandatory 5-year sentence. It took 500 grams of powder cocaine to get that same mandatory 5-year sentence. We all know that crack was primarily used and sold in black communities, powder cocaine primarily used and sold as a recreational drug to white folks with money. Things like that. We got to correct. Of course, that law it no longer exists, but I pointed out to paint that picture. And so marijuana is becoming legal in a lot of states. A lot of other state governors are issuing pardons, but we still criminalize and convict people of that here in Georgia. So I'm going to take that off of the table. Having a marijuana conviction, like when I mentioned the Justin Martin story.
You're talking about possession of marijuana.
Yeah. I'm not talking about.
What about dealers that have like a truckload of it? And
that's different.
Okay.
Like we still got to hold. We still got to deal with that. But marijuana possession, we're not going to prosecute that anymore. Every other drug possession case, heroin, crack, meth, whatever it is, we're going to operate off of the system that Seattle uses. So the goal is to divert all of them, where we align you with the services and treatment that you need to help you break out of the lifestyle that you're in. I already have 2 partnerships ready to go with local businesses where we're going to create a 20-week-long diversion program. During that 20 weeks, the person will be taught a job skill. One company is an AV television company. They do home theaters and audio systems, things like that. The other company is an IT company, a national company. IT, computer engineering, things along those lines. So they'll be taught a skill over 20 weeks. At the end of the 20 weeks, they will earn a certificate, something tangible with their name on that they can be proud of. And these 2 companies have promised to offer jobs. And so my goal is to have at least 10 of these partnerships my first year in office. And then by the end of my first term of 4 years, I want to have at least 50 of them where we can create pipelines of jobs to help break people out of the situations that they're in. And so like I mentioned earlier, if we get people busy working and living better lives for themselves, we don't have to worry about them committing crimes against us. Oh, one more.
Yes.
One more that's important. School to prison pipeline. So I mentioned earlier, before this campaign, before any of this, the day I finished law school, I started going to talk at schools to try to inspire kids. We are too quick, and you've seen this administration use its prosecutorial discretion to just throw kids away. Our kids, a lot of kids, especially in lower income areas, they go to school every day and they see a resource police officer there who's there to enforce or criminalize behaviors, enforce bad behaviors. So kids are taught very early on to distrust and dislike police officers. I mean, they go to school and see them every day. The interaction is only negative. So we're going to create a mentorship program through the DA's office called I Determine My Future, where an assistant DA will visit. We're going to go to every school in Fulton County Public Schools, Atlanta Public Schools, whatever other public school system is in Fulton County. We'll be at every school once a month. And the plan is to be mentors and leaders to the kids. The interaction is to be completely positive, where we're there to inspire, encourage, and motivate them, hang out with them, get to know them. Also tell them about what our job is. We do things like mock trials and things like that, but it's not to be negative at all. It's not to chastise them. It's not to negatively reinforce anything. It's all positive interaction. And by giving kids that ability to see people who are successful, to see people, in some instances, they'll look like them. In other instances, they won't. But just that ability to hang out with law enforcement in a positive way, I think will work wonders in terms of helping save our kids, to diverting some of them from committing some crimes just because they got a little bit of encouragement along the way.
Yeah. And this is an extreme case, but what about the kids? My last criminal case that I ever handled was a young man. He had, by the time I got on the case, I was brought in by another defense attorney. And this is when I was just done with criminal defense. But this guy, he was 16 when he was arrested, armed robbery. He was heavily involved with a local gang that had ties to bigger stuff. And, one thing kept on being uncovered, and we thought we were dealing with one case. And, of course, the leverage to prosecute the case was they had various other police reports where they believed it was absolutely him involved in the situation. And so I remember our backs were up against the wall, and we resolved the case, and he went to prison for a lengthy time. You hate to see, he was 18 by the time he was convicted. You hate to see that, but he will get out, and he will have the chance to live a somewhat of a full life given his conviction.
Yeah.
But that's one of those stories that just kept on getting worse and worse and worse. And I remember when we were resolving the case, I went back in the holding cell and I told him, this is the deal. This is going to resolve everything you're accused of. You're pleading this one offense. They will not indict any other cases. He's like, any other case? He kept on saying, any other case? I'm like, well, if you killed somebody, they're probably going to indict you. I'm like, but I'm assuming you haven't, and I have no reason to believe you have. And he's like, all right, but I mean, that guy at 16 seemed like a lost soul, man.
Yeah.
How do you recover somebody like that? I mean, do you have to get them when they're 12? I mean,
we get them as early as we can get them, and so what happens a lot of times now, you'll have like the school suspension cases where the school system essentially will just throw these kids into the juvenile justice system, and so I can only imagine that this kid you're talking about probably had some experience with the juvenile system. So at that level, I want us to start really getting to the root causes of why kids are there. A lot of times these kids are hungry. A lot of times these kids if they have a parent, they might be working 2 or 3 jobs, or they might have a parent struck out on drugs, so they're essentially raising themselves. And so I want us to use our power to do everything we can to help keeping these kids as kids before they end up lost. Now, will we save everybody? Probably not, but at least we will try. At least we will do more than what's being done now. And by partnering with community resource providers to do that, I can think about the At Promise Center. The At Promise Center has wraparound services in there. There's organizations like Chris 180 that they work with counseling for kids and kids who are homeless. They help them overcome that and break out of that. So there are a lot of other avenues and resources out there. This Next Level Boys Academy, a program started by a guy named Gary Davis, who works with Killer Mike. I mean, there are organizations out there that, unfortunately, our DA now doesn't utilize because he would rather get that conviction rate versus helping save a kid who can potentially be saved. And so, your client that you had, I'm sure at some point along the way, some adult could have sat down and figured out, why is he doing this? How do we capture him before he gets attached to the gang, or if he's in the gang before he gets too deep in the gang. We the adults, we miss it. We can't put it all on the kids. We miss it. We don't put our energy and our efforts and our resources into saving them. And so that's what you all can expect from me as a leader of the Fulton DA's office. My energy and effort and time is not going to be seeking conviction. It's going to be seeking ways to help people live better lives. And our convictions are part of the game. Yeah, I mean, my job is to hold people accountable for the crimes that they commit. But right now, I think too many resources are put into crimes that I call quality of life crimes. That if we partner with other folks, get folks to treatment, we can save lives. I can use my resources better in the DA's office to fight the really nasty and heinous crimes that that truly threaten our safety. The armed robberies, the sexual assault crimes, things along that nature, where we just spend too much, how we went over that scenario earlier. We throw these crazy numbers at people for small, nonviolent cases and brag about the conviction rates that we get off of that misdemeanor, instead of partnering with the community folks like PAD, like that LEAD program in Seattle, helping those folks get on track. Now we can put more attention on the violent stuff, being more visible out there in terms of trying to prevent it, first of all. And then I think, too, the community having a leader who's willing to be visible and engaged and accessible and truly be, a DA for the people. I think that visibility will just help inspire some people who might otherwise, been heading down one path where, hopefully they'll change. And then, just knowing my backstory, knowing that I can relate to a lot of people. My goal is to truly inspire everybody to pursue their dreams and not fall into the justice system. I would love it if my job were boring, if we didn't have cases because people were busy working, people were busy pursuing their dreams and not committing crimes.
I'd like you to touch on for a minute just maybe what white folks like myself need to understand. I don't know many white people that would ever admit that they are racist. Okay, and this is obviously a sensitive topic. This is a whole other area. Like my friends on the left think I'm conservative. They think I'm some right winger. My friends on the right, they think I'm this crazy liberal. So I'm like this this guy politically that doesn't have a home. But anyway, someone like me, play the dumb white guy for a second. Voted for Barack Obama. Mm. I love Julio Jones. I want black people to have immense success in this community. And of course, we want to see, I think generally speaking, we all want the same things anyway. But what do you want folks like me to understand about racism in America? And I was wondering if you could give me like specific examples of, I guess you already touched on it a little bit with like zoning laws, disparity there, issues like that. But what are other everyday examples you've seen of racism growing up or just even today? And are we better off than we were 20, 30 years ago?
Are we better off? Maybe. Maybe. But I think the biggest thing that, my brothers and sisters like you can do is to be willing to have the conversations. I think a lot of times, one of the things I used to hear, especially during my college days, was, I'm not racist because, my ancestors owned slaves, not me. Like,
oh, yeah.
I don't have anything to do with slavery. That was always an argument that I heard growing up. But, and I think a lot of times, and I've also heard, some white folks say, get over it. Slavery was a long time ago. You guys are allowed to go to college now. You got, get over it. But if it were that easy, we would be over it. And it's not that it happened. And that's why I mentioned the zoning laws. That's why I mentioned the black codes, because we are fighting this uphill battle against things that have been ingrained into the backbone of the legislative framework of this country. And so just having people like you who are willing to use your voice to call it out and say, hey, white folks, maybe we should, listen to what they're saying and just not get offended by what they're saying. And I think that, having conversations like this, man, is the best way to start. I think it means a lot to me and everybody that you were willing to sit down and even have this conversation in a productive and meaningful way. There were no shots thrown, no offenses, thrown at each other. It was all about how do we take what happened to George Floyd and Ahmaud Arbery and all these other folks, and how do we build from here? It's like, okay, these things happen, we're hurt by it, but let's sew up the wound. Let's put a Band-Aid on it and heal. Let's stop cutting that wound open. And I can't think of anything specific to say other than just have the conversations, be a voice. It can't only be black voices out there asking for equality. We need our white brothers and sisters to say that too. Like, hey, it's time for us to make sure that they are treated as equals. As all men were created equal. That phrase didn't include black folks when it was written, but we need to make it include us now. And I think having elected officials willing to acknowledge that, who are white, is that would be a game changer. And to that point, I just created a website. Doesn't have anything to do with my campaign. It's all about the call to action that I threw out earlier about calling out DAs across the country. I'm also now calling out every elected official across the country to stand up and enforce equality, to no longer let law enforcement or anybody hide behind the roots of racism. Let's check these things. Let's nip it in the bud. Let's heal. The website is called thesocialjusticeleague.org. If you are an elected official, you can sign up on a website. We'll put your picture up there. So it's so that people in your community know that you are committed to standing up against racism, that you can be counted on as an ally and a leader to use your voice to help us make our society better. So the website just went live like today. This is my first time promoting it. All of that, the promo and all that stuff will come better. This just felt like a perfect segue to say it. That it's bigger than me, man. It's bigger than just my campaign in Fulton County. I'm using, the platform that I have through this campaign and my voice to really try to change our society for better. And I want other leaders to do that. And unfortunately, our leaders of the past, they've only cared about themselves. It's time for us to vote them out and vote for leaders who want to bring us all together.
I think what's so important about what you're doing and the position that you're running for is that I think it all starts with criminal justice. So much of the disparity that we see, I think, starts with unfair prison sentences, unfair arrests. Yeah. I saw it as a public defender. I was a public defender before I was a prosecutor, by the way.
And all right, Paisley.
Yeah,
that's what's up.
So actually, I've told many people this, and maybe I've said it before on the podcast. My favorite law job ever in my life was working for Robert Wesley down in Orlando as a public defender. And he said something really interesting as well. And he said, a prosecutor with a sense of justice can do more than 100 of the best criminal defense lawyers. And that is absolutely true. Yeah. And then when I left his office and became a prosecutor, that never left my mindset, and that's so I was someone like you, and I was getting in trouble for being, for this judge wouldn't accept pleas because I wouldn't put people convicted of marijuana in jail. I'd only give them fines, Yeah. But why I did that? Because like a week before that, I was smoking weed in my neighborhood with my friends. I'm serious. And I was like, here I am smoking weed, with my white friends. And here I am. And the other day I was putting people in jail for smoking weed. And I'm like, this is fucked up,
Yeah, man.
So anyway, after that point, I was like, I can't do that anymore. So anyway, I wasn't employed there much longer. I was offered a nice job at a good defense firm. So, but anyway, like I said, I think if us as white folks, if we can at least admit there is certainly white privilege in the criminal justice system, then I think you look at the collateral effects of that and what is the ripple effect outward from there. And then I think we can see where it affects other things as well. So, and that's where it kind of started for me, kind of looking at that. I'm like, damn. It's kind of messed up. And also, white people, or maybe just people in power in general, while they're going out as, white people occupy less of an office, I think, and is maybe our country is voting maybe more to the middle. Hopefully we are. But you see that people, the power leaving office, they tend to do things that make their power last a little longer, whether it's gerrymandering, whether it's making sure we can't vote for a Supreme Court and those justices are appointed instead by the powers that be. That's a whole nother conversation. Yeah. I was like, just more tricks that we had to keep power, But and like I said, maybe that's a power move. I don't know if it's just a white thing, but anyway, I think what's so important about what you're doing is I think it all starts with criminal justice, and having a prosecutor with a sense of justice is what we need right now. So. I love the conversation. When is the date to vote for you or for your two opponents?
Voting day, election day is June 9th. So early voting is going on right now.
As of the date of this recording is June 3rd right now. I'll probably post this in the next 2 or 3 days, but yeah.
Okay. Thank you, sir. Early voting ends this Friday, June 5th. If you want to go out and vote early. Game day, election day is June 9th. So everybody, please wise up. Vote Christian Wise Smith for Fulton County District Attorney. Help me start this movement.
What is voting like for people that are concerned about germs and stuff like that? Yes, you can do early voting, but we didn't get our early voting applications, which is weird. But we already know we changed our registration, everything. We're good, but
so the voting locations are they're enforcing rules of social distancing. Like they're making sure that the spaces between people are 6 feet. I can't remember if they are requiring you to wear a mask or if they're giving them out, but I know that they're doing everything that they can to keep everybody safe. If you got one of the absentee ballots and you want to drop them off, you can drop them off at any of the voting locations. And I'm going out on election day. I just think it would be cool to vote for myself on actual election day. I've never voted for myself before.
Yeah.
And I'll have a mask on. My wife will have a mask on, and my kids. So, yeah, everybody, wear a mask when you go. Make sure that you are keeping, yourself and everybody safe around you. And I know that the voting locations are enforcing those rules too.
Where else can people find more about your cause? I think you talked about it, some of the websites before, but why don't you go over those real quick?
Oh, yes, sir.
And how people can contact you as well.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. The website for the campaign is wisesmith2020.com. That is WISESMITH2020.com. On Instagram, you can follow me at wisesmith2020. Twitter, wisesmith2020. Facebook is Christian Wise Smith. And then my call to action for everybody across the country, the socialjusticeleague.org. Let's make that a big movement where we make us a better country by being accountable to each other and making us all better people.
One more question from my buddy Bob at church. He wants somebody to comment on this, so who better than you? Why doesn't Georgia have a hate crimes bill?
Georgia is one of 4 states without one. And I'm glad you asked that question, because that has been a part of my campaign as well, is lobbying legislators to make sure we get one. People should not be discriminated against because of what you look like, because of who you love, because of what your religion is. And for some reason, Georgia is always one of the last states to get things right. I mean, Georgia has always been a very conservative state. And, like I just said, we are only one of 4 states left now without one. So come on, Georgia, let's get this right. Let's make sure that we protect all of our citizens, and that we make sure we're preaching that to everybody, to our kids, that, love, it's about human beings were meant for love. I mean, think about every wedding you go to. Love is patient, love is kind, love doesn't keep track of wrongs. That scripture out of Corinthians where we hear about love. And think about how you feel when you're stressed out. You get a headache, you might get an ulcer, your stomach hurts. Like, we weren't designed to take on hate and oppression and negativity. We were created for love. So let's start loving each other. There's the things that separate us and make us different are so small and compared to the things that connect us and bring us together. But for whatever reason, throughout history, we focused on those little things versus the bigger picture. So I'm speaking up. I'm asking other people to speak up with me. Thank you, Paisley, for giving me this platform to tell everybody, just practice love. Just love your neighbor. Love everybody, and that will make us a better people.
Can't agree with that more. So real quick on the hate crimes thing, is it more just political, just because the right and left might disagree on what the hate is, because they associate that maybe with like a gay rights agenda or a
Yeah, my gut is that it had everything to do about sexual orientation more so than race. And again, who somebody decides to love, how does that negatively impact my life? And I want to point this out too. Everything about my campaign, everything that I've been preaching is personal to me. I have 2 brothers and 1 sister, and my sister is lesbian. And seeing her experiences, throughout high school and in her adulthood now, she's 26. Just seeing, some of the discrimination that her and her girlfriend have gotten, I'm like, why? Like, they chose to love each other. Let them love each other and be happy. So, I do think that it has something to do with, just the history of Georgia being so conservative, and for whatever reason caring so much about not letting gay people just live happy lives. Like, let's let everybody live a happy life. We need a hate crime bill. We need a hate crime law now, today. Let's get that passed.
Awesome. Well, with that, my friend, I think we should end it there. And when you are district attorney, after your hopefully there won't be a runoff. Hopefully you can just take it.
Yeah, I'm hoping so too.
There was somebody in office. I won't say his name. I mentioned them earlier, but I was texting them the other day, and they're like, "Yeah, I think Paul's in trouble." So if you are elected, what I love most about any prosecutor is one that is approachable, that will listen. I hope I never take another criminal case on again, but if I do one, probably it would be pro bono, be something about a cause that I care about, and I know that you would be there to listen to me. So thanks for coming on here. Thanks for being just someone we can just again, sit down, have open conversation. I love it. And anything you ever need from me, I'll be there for you.
Hey, thanks, Paisley, man. I appreciate your support. And everybody, June 9th, wise up. Vote Christian Wise Smith, Fulton County DA. Let's make our system people over conviction rates. Let's make our society better. I want to do this with you. Not for you, with you. Join me. Let's make this a big people power movement. I appreciate you, man. Thank you.
Yeah, and let me make no secret. I mean, this is not the podcast where I just give people an open voice and never endorse anybody. No, I fully endorse you 1,000%. Okay?
Thank you.
There you go. All right, we'll end it with that.